Two Babies in a Business, a podcast about business, growth, marketing strategy, babies, marriage. I think that was all of them. This is the first time I'm not looking at a cheat sheet.
Yeah, right.
Only like 35 episodes later.
We'll have to talk about babies and marriage sometime.
Well, why don't you start off with some babies and marriage?
No, all right. Let's dive into the topic. Maybe we'll do some topics on that afterward.
Avoiding.
Yeah. So today we're talking about understanding where to be flexible in your marketing budget.
You could also talk about where to be flexible in your marriage.
Well, marriage and marketing is maybe some similar in some ways.
Oh, good. No.
Try to come up with a topic there. Anyways.
I'll think about it.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, isn't it? I think especially as an agency, it's there's certainly things that are kind of long term and you don't want to be kind of tinkering with and changing all the time. And there's some things that are less like that, right?
I think what we could do, I was thinking about this, is like maybe we name a tactic and we give our opinions on whether people should be flexible with it or not.
Okay. Let's maybe first talk about what it means to be flexible.
It's like such a loaded question.
Yeah.
I think, given the state of the world, and I think, it's almost not a cop-out, but so many people talk about how much has changed because of pandemic and pre-pandemic and post-pandemic and what the world looks like. But there are always going to be certain environmental factors, whether it's a boom or bust economy or whatever's going on, or the state of your industry or politics or those things. And I think it's, as you're building your budget and you're putting those numbers together, the flexibility to know, life changes day by day. And I think the ultimate lesson for us was last year at the beginning of the year, we decided from a marketing perspective that we were going to make a significant investment in our target audience in the tourism space.
Right.
And March hit, and I don't have to tell the world what happened, but obviously tourism has been one of the hardest hit industries.
Yeah.
And I think we're fortunate to have great relationships where we have certain clients and partners that we're able to invest more or pivot or do different things and remained very strong clients and partners. And then we had some that, unfortunately had to shut down operations for a time being, which obviously affected us too. That said, our flexibility didn't come from then completely shutting down our marketing program and going, oh, darn, I guess we can't hit tourism this year.
Right.
It became flexible in terms of, all right, how do we still add value? How do we remain front and center? What markets are we going to pivot to? Where can we continue to invest? Where can we scale back a little bit? Because obviously there was some uncertainty for us in terms of revenue. But that flexibility of, certain personalities, especially ones like mine, you dig your heels in a bit and it's easy to go, oh, well, and walk away. But for me, that's what flexibility in your marketing budget is. So for us, it meant actually having to invest a little bit more to break into markets that we weren't yet exposed to.
Yeah. And actually COVID is a good example too, in terms of, again, just thinking about our business here. We did a major pivot immediately to doing a bunch of webinars and sort of taking I would call it a brand building approach, right? So we had very, very aggressive strategies and tactics around that lead generation side of things. And then obviously the world became very uncertain. And so we almost immediately pivoted and said, let's kind of pause the sort of lead generation side and let's accept the fact that we're probably not going to be, net gaining a whole bunch of new customers in the short term. So we started doing webinars around a bunch of topics just to stay top of mind. And that actually worked really well. So that's a great example of flexibility. We changed tact, but we didn't necessarily change everything. So we continued to do search engine optimization, still had that content strategy in place, and we're still doing content development. So that was still, our long-term stuff, our long-term kind of tactics. stayed in place, and our shorter term tactics kind of pivoted and changed to kind of meet the environment. And it worked really, really well. I mean, we had very, very good success with that program as a result of COVID. And I think it was also being flexible about our expectations, right? I mean, I think we had a very transparent conversation about we're going to do a hell of a lot of work here. And we're going to have not really the greatest line of sight into how that's actually going to turn into kind of revenue. But we know that it's important not to like hide away and disappear and completely like fall off people's radars. We knew that it was important to be as top of mind as possible and to kind of be seen as leading and communicating as much as possible. And sure enough, we did definitely grow as a result of that after a very quick and harsh and immediate sort of shrinkage of revenue. Just when people panicked, many clients came back and many new clients came in because, as people started to realize again, the importance of digital, that was probably a big pivot for many businesses, where maybe, and another great example with COVID is the trade show, sort of market disappeared, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of companies made a decision to sort of take the money they would normally invest in trade shows and invest in digital, right? So that was another good kind of example of being flexible and pivoting and sort of still seeing some value and some outcomes out of that.
Well, and our flexibility with the webinar strategy too spoke to kind of bottom line of dollars. So to us, the conversation internally, to your point, was like, this is going to be a hell of a lot of work. And it was, but it was our internal costs, right? It was, largely your time, my time, Kaylin's time. Whereas, it wasn't, a couple $1,000s bill to do a LinkedIn social selling campaign or a PPC campaign. So, the flexibility and budget for us too came from, all right, so we do need to save on the cash flow perspective, but we know marketing is still important. So where can we shift from a financial perspective to make sure that we're still out there, like you said, but still being mindful of the environment and money.
Yeah. So with probably just a few minutes we have left, let's just maybe at least talk about a few tactics where maybe more or less flexible. So I will say investments in website and investments in building organic traffic to your website is an area where you should not be flexible.
No, it honestly, nothing is more heartbreaking to me than when a client pauses or stops an SEO program. Especially those that see gains and like that reminder that like your SEO is growing each month. So when the most common thing is, oh, can we just pause for a month? Or let's pause for this quarter. Yeah. And to me, it's just like devastating because in a lot of these places, it's like you're just scratching the surface, or you've just started ranking, or you're just getting there, and it's like I can taste it, and then you want to scale back.
And it's probably the hardest place for people to kind of stay the course, because it does take a while to get those results. But again, looking at the pandemic, the companies that were investing long-term in SEO are the ones that actually saw the most benefit and gain when the pandemic happened. So where they stopped is maybe investing in pay-per-click advertising. And so that's a place where I think you can be more flexible. And really those short-term tactics are the ones where maybe there's more flexibility because you need to be adapting to the environment. Whereas the longer-term tactics are the ones that I think you should be less flexible in. And so, companies stopped investing in PPC almost immediately, many of them, at least in the short term. But because they were investing in SEO, they were still seeing major gains in traffic, because what happened was a lot more people were home, a lot more people were searching online. Right? Like people were looking for things to do online, and the internet and search became very important. So, and then a lot of those companies ended up putting their PPC back on as well, because they started to realize that, people are still searching and looking for things and buying more online or whatever. Right.
The other thing I'll say to your point, kind of when you said your online presence, is like, don't be flexible and cheaping out on your website. Yes. So if someone comes to you and says, oh, I'll slap something up for $1,000 or $3,000, or, ask a lot of questions and be suspicious. Like, we have recently had a client that had come to us early last year who had a website and paid very little for that website in the first place. There were clearly some issues with it. And lesson learned for us, we should have said, you need to rebuild your website. But what we said is, okay, we'll try to work with what you have and build on it. And, thousands of dollars spent with us trying to fix a bad website. And now the result a year later is spending significantly more to now build something that works better and actually works, period. So, don't set a healthy website budget that includes, if you're building a new one, great, but also a healthy website budget that allows you to make changes and adapt each month, because, you don't let your website become your money pit, I guess.
Yes. And on that note, I think one area to not be flexible is when you're going to work with an agency or somebody's going to build a website for you. The area to not be flexible is ownership and control of your website. This is the number one thing we run into, is people, that go and they get this, fancy custom website built on some proprietary weird code or whatever.
That really isn't that fancy.
That isn't anything different from a regular WordPress website that anybody can make edits to and change. I mean, there might be some features here and there, but and then they end up stuck in a contract where, it's like, hey, I want to make a change to my website. Oh, we got to hard code that. It's going to be $300 an hour. It'll be $5,000 to change that, right? This is probably the number one area of frustration I see with people. Frankly, as an agency owner, it's appalling to me. And so, make sure when you're building your website and your assets, your digital presence, all of that, the one area never to be flexible with is ownership, and be very upfront with the agency and the person you're working with, and understand what that's going to look like, and ask a lot of questions, because this is your money, it's your investment, it's your asset. And in my opinion, nobody has the right to try to hold you ransom because of their shitty business practices, frankly. And there's a lot of assholes out there. This is like, I'm getting passionate because it really pisses me off, and it really makes our industry look bad. When you have these developers out there that, basically create websites that are like money traps for people. Never, ever go down that path. And I'm happy to give anybody listening to this free advice. You don't have to build a website with me. I just want you to end up with something that's going to be working for you long-term. So I'm happy to help you and tell you which questions to ask and advise you here, because I care so much about this topic.
Well, we're going to delve into more of this in our next episode. We're going to talk about big projects and what you should budget and not. So tune into that too. But don't be flexible on your SEO. Don't be flexible on website budget, but be flexible in terms of, watching that external environment and understanding where you can shift brand awareness activities, what you can take in-house, what you can scale back, be flexible in your PPC. I think that's great advice.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again soon.